has actually turned out to be the film that Jake Gyllenhaal thought he'd be making, because as you say, it is a boxing film, and boxing films do tend to follow a similar kind of a path. But with this one, at first, certainly, it seemed to be going in a different direction. When we join the film, he is a very successful boxer. He has a particular style of fighting where he likes to be punched, knocked around a bit first. That gets his juices flowing, and then he goes on the attack. And his wife, who's played brilliantly by Rachel McAdams, is anxious about this style of fighting. She thinks, it's going to be detrimental to his health in a couple of years. He's going to be in terrible shape. Then a kind of a catastrophic event happens. I'm not sure if it's a spoiler or not, but I'm going to
in the trailer, right?
mention. Well, I won't mention it here because when I saw it, having not seen the trailer, it did kind of give me a bit of a jolt. So I'll leave that aside. But anyway, his career goes into freefall, his finances go into freefall, and he loses custody of his daughter. And then the film kind of becomes, or it seems to be becoming, more of a melodrama. He hits bottom and he starts working in a gym that's run by Forrest Whitaker, who is in no way fazed by his celebrity, and makes him, mop the floor and sweep up and teach these young kids. And you think, okay, this is interesting because he's come out of poverty via boxing. Boxing has given him purpose in life, and it's given him a focus and something, worthwhile to pursue. And now around him in this gym are all these kids who are in the same position. You think this is really interesting. It's kind of feeding back. It's a sort of a cyclical thing, and perhaps he'll help lift them up and find some kind of satisfaction that doesn't involve going onto an enormous boxing ring in the middle of Las Vegas and beating up his arch enemy. And then 50 Cent shows up and he says, so how about you go to an enormous boxing ring in the middle of Las Vegas and beat up your arch enemy? And he goes, great idea. And the film drops all of these incredibly, potentially interesting plot threads and just fits in lockstep with this boxing movie cliche. So, redemption for him is becoming famous again and beating up someone who's nasty. And it feels like an enormous squandering, particularly of the physical effort that he has put into this role. I don't know if you remember when the first pictures of his body,
I don't remember, Robbie. Do you remember that?
With a kind of terrifying clarity. I think it was in December last year, these pictures came out of him kind of standing in. Yeah, okay, so let's not go into this one. But he was standing in the ring, kind of covered with blood, and this his body, this is straight after Nightcrawler, where he's played this weedy, kind of insidious little character, a news cameraman who's skating around LA.
He says in the interview, actually, he did a film in between. It was like 6 months. He did Everest in between. So it's the film,
which I believe is another very physically grueling film. But you have this idea that, almost like Christian Bale going from The Machinist to Batman Begins, that an enormous amount of physical change has happened between these two roles. And it's, it's not a Magic Mike body. It's a body that looks like it can do serious damage.
Oh, yeah.
And you kind of think, okay, so this is going to be some pretty hard-hitting stuff. And the fact that investment is just not paid off at all in the drama, to me, is very exasperating. I do wonder if these plot lines were tied up more satisfactorily at one stage, and the film was slightly pared down at one stage. You've got Naomi Harris.
Naomi Harris, who's just like such a fantastic actress, and she doesn't get used in this at all. And you think there must have been a strand at some point where they got together. She plays the social worker who's looking after his daughter, and like you said, for me, that's the best bit of the film. Him and her, Una Lawrence, together. And Naomi Harris is sort of not used at all. And there's one little bit where they're watching the boxing match at the end and she fist pumps and stuff, and you think, oh, they're going to get it together, and they never do. And I'm sure there must have been a strand in the script that was that.
I think so. And it seems, the film is already more than 2 hours long, so it's long enough. You're not kind of wanting more, but you just, all of these threads that I picked up, there's, in fact, borderline disgraceful treatment of one subplot with one of the kids who's in the boxing gym.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, he's having trouble at home, his dad's aggressive towards his mother, and this kind of becomes something to solve. And that plot is kind of pinched out like a candle wick, just in one kind of throwaway line, and you think these stories, they're not being treated like they matter. Now, cliche in boxing films is fine, and one of the great fight movies of recent years is Warrior, with Tom Hardy and Joel Edgerton. Now, that is incredibly cliched, cleaves to the formula, totally in step with it all the way. But the reasons that they're fighting, Tom Hardy to kind of raise the money for his bereaved friend's wife, and Joel Edgerton to kind of pay for his daughter's treatment. Those stakes matter in and of themselves. They're not just mechanisms to get these actors into the ring and beat each other up.
Yeah,
that's all that Southpaw is. Every little kind of bit of extraneous drama is just purely to push him on and change him as a person in order to bring him to that final fight.
Yeah, and it's not like a rags to riches story. It's more of a riches to rags to riches story, isn't it? I mean, it starts with him at the height of his power. What about him in it? I mean, the physical side, actors changing their physicality, that's fine. I mean, like I say in the interview, if you're going to play the heavyweight or the light heavyweight champion of the world, you better look like it. And he really does, but not above and beyond that. And he sort of moves like a boxer. He looks like he can fight, which is really great. But what about his performance psychologically? What about him getting into this character? What did you think about that?
I mean, I don't think there's the raw material there to work with. A lot of what he has to do is basically mumble. You know, there's not a lot beyond that to do. When you've got someone like 50 Cent turning up, I mean, who looks so kind of comfortable in his film. It's like he arrived on set in his slippers or something, and he just puts zero effort into this role. But zero effort certainly comes across in the film when you're watching it. You know, it just feels so kind of lazy and so unexploited. And then you've got people like Naomi Harris, like we mentioned, on the absolute fringes of the film. You think, no, come on, let's move the story over there. You know, Antoine Fuqua is a really good director.
I thought the fight scenes were brilliant.
And yeah, the fight scenes are great. I have to
say that, you know, when you've been doing a boxing film in the light of Rocky and Raging Bull and all that, you're thinking, okay, how are you going to approach this? And they approach it in a very televisual way. And I thought, you know, and I think they got the guys who actually cover the boxing fights in the US to shoot those scenes. I thought that was really good. The atmosphere around the boxing ring was wonderful. And I also thought that, you know, Rachel McAdams was fantastic at the beginning of the film.
She is very good, and again, she's kind of wasted it. Yeah. She's not given enough to be getting on with. I mean, if you think about a film like The Fighter, the David O. Russell film, where there's this kind of magnificent whirl of chaos around these two boxers at the centre of that. Again, it's like the dramatic stakes matter for their own sake. It's not just purely a mechanism to get these guys fighting, and that's totally what Southpaw doesn't manage to do.
When the Culture Show first started, I did a report about the rise of computer graphic animation, in which we had hand-drawn animators worrying that actually their art form was going to be lost, but quite the opposite has happened.
I'm sorry, this was the point at which I started going, then comrades come rally. Sorry, okay. As for the rest of them,
What was that?
That's the Internationale.